Have you ever been through a trial and you're like, man, what in the world? Yeah, me too. We are going to be talking about trials today. Welcome to the Elevate Your Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Chris Phillips, and we're going to talk about how God uses those trials in our lives to help us go where he wants us to go, to do the things he wants us to do, which ultimately ends back with elevating our leadership so that others around us can also elevate their leadership as well. So tune in. Can't wait. Let's go. Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your Leadership podcast. I am your host, Chris Phillips, here as always with my man,
Adam Pelham.
Hey, don't forget, we talk about elevating your leadership. And the reason we talk about that is because we believe that God wants leaders to raise their level of leadership so that others around them can also raise their level of leadership. Quote I often use a lot is that the rising tide lifts all ships. And so as you elevate your leadership, the people around you will also elevate theirs and help you go further, faster to do what it is that God has called you to do. And so that's what we're here to talk about today, elevating your leadership. And we're going to talk about it, Adam, in a unique way, because normally when you're talking about elevating something, you don't talk about something going wrong.
Yeah, it's true.
Or a trial, right? And so we're going to talk about trials today. We're going to talk about how you elevate your leadership through embracing trials that come your way, circumstances that go wrong that come your way, and how by doing that, it actually isn't necessarily always a bad thing, but it can be used to help build endurance to get you to where God wants you to go. I mean, the analogies are all over the place with this. I mean, I'm a big sports guy, Nuggets guy.
Come on.
We're in football season now.
Bo Nix, baby.
Bo Nix.
Go.
I'm also a University of Tennessee grad.
We look good.
And we looking good right now.
Nico for Heisman.
Come on, let's go. And anyways, all of that to be said, when you are in the gym, when you are working out,
Yep.
when you are learning a new playbook, when you're doing something else, there are times that go bad. Like maybe they're not a trial, but it does feel like a trial. It feels like failure a little bit. Trials feel like failure. But that helps you gain the endurance you need to make it through a season, to make it through, a rough patch, right? You go back to your training. You go back to how you came over and overcame those trials and things like that. And so, man, trials are really looked at in a hardship way across the country and around the world. But sometimes I think we can view them as a way to build endurance to go further and to do exactly what it is that God has called us to do. And so in a recent message, we talked about this, Adam. We were looking at the story of James and talking about the trials that were there. And in that, I found a story of a marathon runner named Chandler Self. And Chandler Self, man, she hit the wall, like body broke down. And if you're familiar with running, they talk about the wall that you hit, you got to push through. Well, she was struggling to push through, and it was right at the finish line. And she was able to lean back on some of her training, some of her resilience to be able to push through. She was also helped by other people. And by the way, we need to be helped in trials by other people. And she was able to overcome and then finish it. She won her age group, and all of that by pushing through. And there's stories upon stories upon stories in doing that. So what we're going to talk about is how, as leaders, we can really apply this principle to elevate our leadership and in turn, elevate the leaders around us by overcoming the trials that we run through. So we got 3 ways that we're talking through it, Adam, today. The first one is this: embrace the reality of trials. I mean, James is kind of wild. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials. It doesn't say if you face trials, like if they come your way, but whenever you face trials of many kinds, by the way, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And so, man, the reality is, if you're not even a faith-based leader, you're going to have trials.
Yeah.
If you're CEO, trials. Manager, trials. If you're someone that is 3 levels deep, you're still going to face trials. If you're a brand new sales rep, trials. A teacher in an elementary school at the beginning of the year, trials. No matter what it is, you're going to have trials. And I think we try to live in this world where we're like, you know what? I'm going to avoid any hardships. Yeah. You think so?
100%.
Why do you think that's a reality of the world that we live in now.
If we can say that and try to manifest it, we think we're in control when we're really not.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so the minute we get out of control, we get anxiety, we get fears, we get all these things. And so if I can control the trials that I don't need to have, then I feel like I'm actually in control of my life. And in a lot of areas, you're just not. And life happens and trials happen.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like the get off my lawn older guy.
Yeah.
I feel like people today expect to have less trials than they actually have.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, have you studied history?
Right.
Like the Great Depression was a thing.
Right.
Like, I know we're not in a great economy right now, but we are not in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, hey man, like you're going to face trials.
100%.
And I just feel like some people are like, oh, that's cute. You're calling that a trial.
Yeah.
That's what we called like Tuesday when
right.
I was growing up. And so the reality is though, if you go into life thinking you're never going to have a trial, then this is going to be really hard. But if you can shift your mindset as a leader to go, hey, here's the deal. There's a reality that trials are on the way. And it doesn't mean that they can't be overcome. It doesn't mean that they're going to be, something that absolutely destroys us, but it's just a reality of leading that we're going to face trials. Then man, we can go further because when we hit those trials, we're ready.
Right.
Because I think what happens is when we are not ready for the trials or we're not thinking that we're going to face trials, then we hit them. And then we are like, there's like this paralysis.
Yeah.
Oh no, what do I do? But if I'm a leader and go, hey, here's the deal. So I'm a pastor. I deal with people. No matter what decision I make, 50% of the room is probably not going to like it.
Yeah.
Right. If I turn the heat up, 50% of the room is not going to like it. If I turn the heat down, 50% of the room is not going to like it. That doesn't mean I'm going to have trials, but that does mean that decisions I make within the church, there's going to be people that are not necessarily on board right away, which are going to bring some avenues of trials with them.
Right.
Pushback, feedback, criticism, all of those types of things are going to seem like trials. But here's the thing. I know as a leader, I cannot make everyone happy. If I am making everyone happy, I'm probably not doing what God is calling me to do.
Yeah.
Because God didn't call us to live on this like happy-go-lucky. Everyone is hunky-dory with these things that we do. Sometimes we have to prune, pull back, trim a little bit in areas, and that hurts certain people, which means trials are going to be on the way for them and for me and the feedback. So if I go into it going, hey, my goal is not to go through a trial with these people, but the reality is that when I make a decision, I'm probably going to face some pushback on this, then I'm able to hit that like running instead of like at a dead stop, figuring out what to do in that way. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. I think a big piece of this too is like one of the number one things that our culture is obsessed with is just comfort as well.
Yeah.
Like, from a faith-based background, we believe in an enemy. There is a real enemy out there. And his number one goal, I think, right now in modern day America is to make us comfortable.
Yeah.
And so we don't like trials because that makes us uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm reminded even of that saying, hard times create strong men. Yeah. Strong men create easy times create weak men. Weak men create hard times. It's this vicious cycle, right? When we're comfortable, when we're stagnant, that's easy times that we want, but like, do we really want that if it creates, weaknesses in us? And so it's inevitable that trials are going to come, but it produces that endurance. So
we have to embrace it. They're on the way. And the reason we can embrace it is because we know that these trials bring growth.
Right.
And now,
exactly.
You used to work out. You look like you've lost a little bit of weight. I'm just kidding. Just a free tip for anybody out there. If you really want to
playing a lot of basketball lately.
If you want to troll somebody that works out a lot, tell them you think they've lost weight and it just crushes them. But when you work out, it hurts.
Yeah. Doesn't feel good.
But that actually means you're growing.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, hey, so we have to embrace trials because we know they bring growth, but we have to, if we want to get the growth we want, we know that there's going to have to be some pain that comes alongside of it.
Yeah.
Right. So embrace the trials that you're going to face. The other thing too is not just embracing them, but then prepare for them.
Yeah.
Which is also hard. Like, how do you prepare? You know, how do you prepare for a trial that you don't know is coming and when it's coming, right? You know, it's a hard thing to like think through, but like think about it. A marathon runner, I mean, Chandler Self, like she was preparing. She was preparing her body a long time before her body actually hit the wall to help her get past the wall, right? And so we have to prepare to hit the wall so that we can push through the wall when we get to the wall in our leadership in that type of way. And so we really need to prepare for those trials as leaders. We need to prepare for those trials that are going to come our way. And there's a couple of ways to do that. One, I would say like engage in some continuous learning, be in a cohort. I mean, like we live in a cohort world, whether it's a pastor's cohort, a youth leaders cohort, a next gen cohort, whether it's a business leaders cohort, whether it is a networking cohort. There are people that you can get around where there's continuous learning environments. Yeah. And in those environments, what I've often found is if I can get with people that are a stage ahead of me a little bit and be around them, then I'm actually more prepared for what's coming my way because I've learned from them. Yeah. And that's not even like, they didn't tell me, hey, watch out for this, this, and this, X, Y, and Z. But by natural conversations in continuous learning environments, I'm finding out what I'm going to be looking for, you know, in something. I have a friend that just built a church building down in Castle Rock. And so I was just talking about that and like navigating through, like his staff has grown, the church has grown. They're going through the building phase and the pains and all that kind of stuff. Man, I am like, that's in my Rolodex right now. Conversation we had yesterday, it is in my Rolodex for things that we're going to have or face at some point here. And so I'm like, man, that's just a continuous learning environment. What's another thing that you think you could do practically to prepare for trials?
Right. And I'd love to speak to even the young leaders watching this or future leaders. Maybe you're not the head leader yet. Something that even a mentor told me that I just loved and taken from is don't treat your waiting time as just a waiting time, but a training time.
Yeah, right.
Right. Treat your seasons of waiting as a time of actually training now to get you prepared for the trials that are going to come, the leadership things that are going to come. I mean, you even look at the life of David, right? When he goes to fight Goliath, well, he was actually training that whole time. Says he's fighting bears and lions and all these things. And he's like, this dude,
hands.
Yeah, right. He's like, this dude is nothing for me. Why was he able to do that? Because he had that time of waiting to be king, training and doing those kind of things. And he didn't even know what was going to happen, right? That's God using that waiting time as a training time. So I think that's a big key as well. Like, I'm waiting. I might be in a season right now, but actually I can use this as a training time to get me ready for the trials that are to come.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. Like you're going to plant a church one day, and you know a lot of the things I bring you around is so that it can prepare you for when you're planting a church, or I'll put you in positions of leading and having hard conversations. It's not because I don't want to deal with it, because it's going to prepare you for when you are the one that has to have those hard conversations, you know, and stuff like that. And that's really a support network. So you can like build a support network. Like what is if you're going to prepare for a trial, you better have a support network. You better have wisdom around the table, man. I think of Solomon's son taking over. You know, you have this aspect that they're like, hey, I'm going to be with my friends who weren't support network. And then there were some of the older wise sages that were with him that gave him good advice. He went with the young advice. And it's like, dude, not good. You didn't have a good support network. Like they were not actually supporting you. And because they told you bad advice, you need a support system around you of not just yes men, of not just people like you, but wise people that are going to bring wisdom to the table. Who's at your wisdom table? Like we have tables for everything else, like, but who's at your wisdom table? A friend of mine named Ben Pilgreen talks about. And so you need a support network. And then the last one to prepare in terms of actual, like, hey, practically, how can I prepare? Is like develop a crisis plan.
Yeah.
Like, man, I don't know what field you're in, but there's a crisis plan you can put in. Like, hey, if you're in this and you lose XYZ account, what new accounts can you go to, right? So if you're a sales rep and you got to hit quota and you're going to lose an account, or you go off insurance plans or stuff like that, okay, what am I going to do to make up that? What accounts can I go to help me out, right? If you're a teacher and XYZ happens, like they practice their crisis plans as teachers during the school year so that when something happens, they have a fire evacuation plan. They're practicing their crisis plan in the event that a trial comes their way.
That's good.
We've got to do the same thing. We have got to create some sort of crisis plan. This is what I'm going to do. This is what you're saving for a rainy day is what it is, right? You have a savings account. You put money back for 401k. Man, in your job, in your leadership, save up. Have a crisis plan so that as you lead, you're prepared to lead through that trial. Because I'll tell you this, if you can lead through the trial in a prepared way, you're going to go further faster in the life of your people and even in the life of consumers and stuff around you too, because they're going to go, man, the people that were more prepared when COVID hit, that came up with stuff better because they had thought through, okay, what can we do? What can we pull? What do we, they got to the ground quick and had a process and plan. Man, emergency services, you know, when big tragedies hit, they have a plan to go in.
Yeah.
And it's because they've talked about it. In the event that this happens, this is what we do, right? So have that plan. So prepare for it. And then the last thing, Adam, is what? Third thing that you need to work on if you're going to walk through these trials and embrace them is what?
It's foster a culture of endurance.
Come on.
Yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. I just think, I mean,
cardio.
Just got done with the Olympics, right? If Noah Lyles, fastest man in the world, talks a lot of trash on NBA players.
Yeah, NBA players got
nothing. Don't come at
tell
my
me you're
LeBron
a world
James.
champion.
Don't come at my LeBron James.
They're not
like
world
that.
champions. They
NBA
are now
champions. They are now.
Oh, get out.
They are now. But as great as he is, he ain't no marathon runner. And if he tries to sprint as hard as he can at the very beginning in a marathon, you're going to burn out.
Or the 200.
Or the two. Yeah. Yikes. Sorry. Still got bronze, but tough.
COVID.
Yeah, right.
No. Yeah, man. Endurance. Like you have to have a culture of endurance. Like, okay, we're going to sustain it. We're going to make it through. Now, a continuous culture of endurance and trying to maintain endurance, that's called burnout. So you don't want to do that.
Right.
But you have to foster this culture of endurance. And it's not just about surviving. That's not what endurance is, because that's not what James is talking about in the Bible either. Endurance is like actually like growing stronger, right?
Yeah, that's
like
good.
you talk about it, like some marathon runners, they endure through the marathon, but they actually get faster as the marathon goes along.
Right.
And I think that's what James is talking about. In our faith, we're going to have trials. We should be able to move past our trials faster because we're enduring them and because we're relying upon the faithfulness of God for so long in our life.
Yeah.
Like, it should be easier to endure trials as we face more of them because we see God's faithfulness and we have to we can bank on God's faithfulness. I was talking to a young adult, this was a couple months ago. And I was just talking about, like, I'm 43 and this young adult's in their early 20s. And it's easy to look at me at 43 and say, oh, well, that's, blah, I just wish I was there, and I wish I had that, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've got more than 2 decades of God's faithfulness in my life as an example to just lean on in everything I'm at, right? And so, like, it's 20 years more of seeing God's faithfulness than this person. And that's what fostering a culture of endurance is remembering those things, writing them down. And so, man, like, how do you do that? Have an open line of communication. Like, create an environment where we talk through stuff. Like, we're a very collaborative team.
Yeah.
And I think talking through those things helps us endure some of the trials.
Yeah.
Right? Because we do that. What are other ways, Adam? What could you do to kind of foster this culture of endurance?
Yeah. I think we got to celebrate small wins as well. Is a big one. He who is faithful in a little will be faithful in a lot. Yeah. And so taking the small victories, not being so defeated by the small defeats, right? Yeah. And learning from each of those things, I think, is huge.
You don't have to go from 0 to 60 in this game of life.
Yeah.
Sanctification is a word the Bible uses to basically describe helping us become more like Jesus.
Yeah.
That is a lifelong process.
Yeah.
I don't give my life to Christ and I look like Jesus right away.
Right.
And I also can't stay the same.
Yeah.
And so sanctification is like small wins. I'm growing every day into the likeness of Christ until finally I'm face to face with him.
Yeah.
And I'm like Jesus.
It's good.
And so that's small wins.
100%. We were just at a conference in Long Beach, and a line that stuck with me really from the whole week. Shout out Mark Lee. Over there in California, killing it. He said, movements aren't made by the famous. They're made from the faithful. Yeah. So good. And it's just, it goes back to what you said of that years of just small faithfulness in and out, celebrating small wins, not getting defeated by the small defeats. I think it's huge.
And that's really, another piece is like leading by example. Just be faithful. Like just go, be faithful. Recognize that you're not gonna win every time. You're not gonna succeed every time. You're not gonna have it easy all the time. There's gonna be hardships. There's mountaintops and valleys. Guess where the grass grows, Adam?
In the valley.
In the valleys.
Yeah.
And so that's it. Like, we live in Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
Like, all 14ers, hot take here, all 14ers look the same at the top.
Just fly to LA and you'll see the 14er.
A lot of rocks. It's a lot of rocks, not a lot of green. It's a lot of rocks.
It is.
But down in the valleys, where we typically don't like to sit in our life of valleys, is actually where the green grass grows. And so through our trials, there's this green grass. And so here's the one thought I want to like leave you with. What if your setback, like what if your trial, what if your circumstance, what if the setback you have going on in your life right now is actually just getting you ready for a setup for something else? Like think of your setback as a setup for what God wants you to embrace. Think of your setback as a setup for something greater that God has in store for you. Think of your setback as a setup for utilizing the gifts God's given you in a way that's going to help you lead like you've never led before, and that you can elevate your leadership above everything else. And so, man, use the setback, use the trial, use whatever's going on in your life right now as a setup for something else greater so that you can do exactly what it is that God called you to do, ultimately, so you can elevate your leadership so that you're helping those people around you. So, man, that's the thing. Like, just know that the trials are coming, embrace it. Prepare for those trials, and then create just a culture of endurance in your life. And then think of your setbacks as just setups for something greater that God has in store for you. So that's it for this episode of Elevate Your Leadership podcast. I hope you tune in next time, and can't wait to see you soon. I hope you elevate your leadership for you and those around you.